Hi, I'm Anson Garcia with Verizon, and I have with me,
Shanique Fulcher here.
and in this video, we're going to provide you some color around traditional wired broadband versus fixed wireless broadband. And we're also going to pepper in some Verizon product called private IP wireless access, or sometimes referred to as wireless MPN to PIP. First, let's just call a spade, Shanique. FWA from T-Mobile and Verizon has put a complete stop to big cable growth.
I agree with that, Anson. Like historically, FWA has been a huge disruptor to big cable trends. And we see that. We see that today and we know it. But definitely we know fiber has been a small part of this as well, but not as big of as an impact as fixed wireless access broadband has been. So I want to share a quote with you from our analyst when we were reading this paper around fixed wireless access. And it says that the change in cable's broadband outlook has been so dramatic over the last few years because in 2018, to 2021, cable was averaging or responsible for 100% of the broadband industry net customer adds. However, now we see in 2022 and we see going beyond that, there's been a severe halt to that because FWA growth and the growing tide of fiber has impacted cable subscriber growth tremendously all at once. Isn't that cool?
That's wild. Let's throw some numbers out there, Shanique. Verizon FWA net adds Q3 2023, 384,000. All right, I think we've been up over 200,000 for a few quarters now. T-Mobile, fixed wireless access net adds, 557,000. We're going to catch up to them soon, though. AT&T now launched into FWA in 20 markets, but mostly defending their DSL losses. So at first, AT&T was saying that it's a fool's errand, this FWA thing isn't going to work out. And now here they come, Johnny come lately, but they're in for the ride as well. All right, Comcast, the big gorilla in cable broadband, right? Racked up an astounding 18,000 ads? No, 18,000 net losses for Q3 in 2023. That just blows my mind. We put a complete halt to all that stuff.
Wow. So, with all of that information that we just shared, join us to find out a few more things about why fixed wireless access is such a disruptor and how exactly does it stack against those big cable companies as well as fiber networks. In this video, we're going to discuss feature comparisons such as speed, spectrum, and coverage, and we're also going to take it a little bit further to discuss the benefits for those customers who are migrating their terrestrial broadband to fixed wireless access. So take us into the video, Anson.
Awesome. Let's get popping. All right, Shanique, let's get started on this first slide. What is fixed wireless access? Let's give the folks a little overview.
That's a good question, Anson. So FWA, as we call it, it's fixed wireless access. It's basically wireless business internet, and it's a type of wireless technology that uses radio waves to send high-speed signals. As you can see from the slides, that those high-speed signals are offering data transfers to and from our customers' devices. So FWA is intended to primarily be used as a primary or a backup connectivity solution, and it's ideal for those stationary business connectivity scenarios. You'll see, Anson, you'll go in later on those specific use cases where we talk about what exactly, what sectors or what businesses are using FWA. So that's just a brief overview of what it is. We're going to go into more details about the features and others as we progress throughout. So, Anson, I think the next thing I want to ask is, you see the next bullet here talks about last mile, like FWA uses a radio network for the last mile. Like, what exactly does that mean in terms of the network?
Yeah, awesome. So us in the industry, we kind of know what this is, but some folks may not know. So the last mile, any broadband connection or private connection always has this concept of last mile. So that's that cable that's buried under the ground from that head end or hub or something like that. So we always had this kind of star thing. All these cables go to one place, and that's where we connect up to our big network or the internet or private networks or whatever. So we always say it's the last mile. It could be 2 miles, it could be 10 miles. You never know. We just call it that last mile. So FWA, instead of cables going from a hub under the ground to particular homes or businesses or something like that, we're going over the air for that last
Hmm.
mile from the tower, basically over the air. Okay, Shanique, take us into the next bullet.
This point just goes into, it gives a statistical overview of what the market can expect to experience with FWA. So the fixed wireless access market is expected to experience immense exponential growth in the coming years. And the 2019 numbers show that the market was at 396 million, and we can expect that that will grow all the way up to $9.1 billion in 2027. And more so over, the market share is expected to double in the next 5 years. So right now it's at 7.2%, but in the next coming 5 to 6 years, that's expected to go up to at least 16%. So huge exponential growth. It's taking over the market, as you can see.
Yeah, for sure. This
Yeah.
is a good statistic, Shanique, because one of the things I've read lately is this is 2019, and we
Right.
know that 2020, 2021, and especially 2022, I remember that Q1 2022, where Xfinity Comcast added about over 500,000 subscribers, that fell from 500 over 500,000 to at to 5,000, if you can believe
Right.
that. So the CEO over there was talking about, hey, this FWA thing is novelty. It's not going to work. It's going to go the way of the dodo bird, let's say. Okay, that was not the case. He had to actually acknowledge, hey, we have to build the defense for this FWA thing because
Right.
the bulk of the of broadband connections, internet connections for consumers, right? Because that's
Right.
where things start was actually FWA. That's amazing. 500,000 to 5,000?
Okay.
That's bizarre.
Yep.
Okay, so
Yep.
here's some use cases, small businesses or branch offices, and I'm going to key into that. I'm peppering in subscriber growth in the consumer market because it always starts there. Everyone starts using it home, right? And they say, hey, this is pretty good. I'm going to start using it at work too. So it's starting at home, and now we already see the business segment growing with FWA. So small
Right.
businesses, branch offices, rural work sites, we can get out to those rural work sites a lot easier than laying fiber. Maybe they're drilling or fracking or something like that. So it works
Yeah.
real well in these scenarios. Kiosks in stores, within stores, maybe a kiosk in a mall or something that maybe they set up on the north side of the mall, 1 month and set up on the south side of the mall. So there's no cables to run or anything like that. They just do fixed wireless access. They got a little fixed wireless access router and they move it around as they wish. Home
Good
offices,
call out.
obviously that's a really good one. In fact, I was part of a IT test or proof of concept internally just recently, about a month or two ago. And what they did, hopefully most folks are familiar with our little black, who makes that? Asterix, I think, called a
Hmm.
Titan. I forget what it's called, but it's a little black FWA router. And what they did is they built the connection to our internal network into the router. So I was able just to set it on my windowsill and then connect up to it with my work laptop. And I didn't have to VPN in. I didn't have to do anything like that because it was all
Wow.
built in over there. What's great about that, Shanique, is that VPN connectivity is upgraded over the air. So there's no
Wow.
pushing down anything on my laptop. There's no, security updates and all these things for these particular. Yeah, so that's a pretty good use case. I don't know if that's going to go
Right.
anywhere. We haven't seen anybody doing that, but our own IT people are
They're
testing
doing
this.
it. Yep. They're
So you
testing
can
that.
imagine in the future, maybe you get a laptop and a little router,
Router. Yeah. And everything's
and
built in.
everything's built in. Why FWA now? So it was a president long ago, right? It's the economy, stupid, right? These particular MNOs that came out with this, us, T-Mobile, now AT&T, which said they weren't going to play in this area, but here they are with AT&T Air. Um, with the inflation and things like that are going on, people are looking to cut costs. And
Right.
when FWA got thrown out there, even by T-Mobile, no contracts, you get to try it for a month, So you can send it back. So no money out of your pocket. So you can try it. See, is it going to be good enough? Am I close enough to the tower? Do I have a windowsill to put it up that's that's going to be fast enough for me? We're going to avoid the balloon payments that cable operators have. So
Yeah,
nobody
that's
likes
for
that.
sure.
Nobody likes it.
Yeah.
They kind of catch you right with an introductory offer, and it's $50, $60 a month for internet. I'll go with that all day long, no problem. And then a year later, you're not looking, and then boom, it's twice the price. Sometimes in some
Yeah.
markets, it's three times the price.
Yeah.
So we have been competing with other MNOs for
Yeah.
decades. One of
Right.
the things that if you go on Reddit, you'll see nobody likes calling their cable company when they have internet problems.
No,
They're, the,
I
the,
sure
the
don't.
service, the service, the customer service, it just stinks. It's in the garbage over there, and that's all over. It's because they didn't have competition. So we've always had competition. We've been fighting tooth and nail, AT&T and T-Mobile. So customer service is very important to us. So that machine is fairly well oiled. So when we come
Yeah.
in with FWA and say, okay, well, we don't have the gigabyte down, but maybe we have 100 megs down, and that's good enough. And then they can call a good customer service representative that's going to empathize with them. And they've been
Mhm.
trained to take care of the customer and make sure they bring resolution to that ticket. That means a lot. People are going to stick around when you treat them right.
Yeah, and
Right?
that's a good call out, Ensign. And I think even looking from a business perspective, the consumers are becoming a lot more aware of these prices. People are going for this cheaper option, which is FWA. And so the prices for wireline technologies, they've fallen immensely over the past couple of years by roughly the media says 42%. And these
Wow.
MNOs, AT&T, Verizon, we are starting to see the impact of the copper killer, which is fixed wireless access. So there's no investment going into the copper footprint anymore. Everyone's going to this wireless technology. And even AT&T, they announced that they're slashing their copper footprint in half by 2025. You see Verizon is already updating so many circuits on its network from copper. So a lot of people are adapting to this wireless technology here, because they're seeing the impact of its price.
For sure. A little more
Yeah.
color to that is I just read a Consumer Reports article, and they found that in 2022, in a 2022 study, that costs are cheaper in areas that have two or more internet providers. And you
Right.
can kind of see, these cable companies have kind of had a monopoly in some markets. But
Yeah.
when you drop in FWA, that's immediately another internet
Yeah.
provider.
Go ahead.
And what does that do to the competition? Well, they have to adjust. They
Yes.
have to
Yeah.
reduce prices because they're going to have all this churn. They're going to have people going away from them. So they have to reduce in particular markets. Now, the way the cable companies do things, and MNOs kind of do this as well,
Hmm.
certain markets, but especially the cable companies, when they're incumbent, the prices are way high
Yeah.
because there's no
Yeah.
competition. They get lazy in those areas,
Yeah.
so we're coming in and saying, no, you can't be lazy because we're going to take that customer from you.
Yeah, that's a good point. And Anson, we see the next point here is like the 5G standards. Like, tell us a little bit more about what that means in terms of a feature and benefit for FWA.
If no one's familiar with us buying, we bought a bunch of spectrums, C-band, mid-band spectrum, and we paid upwards to 43 or 53 billion, something like that. So we have to go monetize that. When the 5G standard came out, I think it was release 16. When they wrote the standards where you can have these big freeways. I like to call them
Hmm.
freeways. These in 5G you can have 100 lane freeway, all right, or 100 megahertz freeway. In the LTE days, even in LTE advanced, you can have a little sliver, of 1 lane or 5 lanes or 10 lanes or 15 lanes or 20 lanes, but you couldn't have these big, 100 lane
Freeway.
freeways that were out
Yeah.
there. So what happened was the FCC went back, and we'll go into spectrum just real quick, went back and started gathering up all these particular freeways, let's say spectrum, that they had leased out or given out to the satellite companies, the TV broadcast companies, because all that stuff is dying. So
Hmm.
they kind of consolidated that and say, okay, with these new 5G standards, we need to give the MNOs the opportunity to buy large swaths of spectrum so they can deliver more bandwidth. And so to monetize that bandwidth or monetize those big freeways, FWA was natural because a broadband customer is much different than a mobile phone customer. A broadband
Right.
customer has many users behind it. A phone, okay, maybe you do a hotspot or something like that, but that's not really a thing. You need
Right.
an FWA router. You need a router that's connected to the internet, and then you're going to connect all your 4K TVs and your Apple iPads and your iPhones or whatever inside your house, or in a business, all your DOS systems and things like that. So the 5G standard, which opened up more freeways, the spectrum and the FCC leasing out that spectrum, gathering it first, and then leasing out large freeways to the MNOs, really then turned into all this capacity and coverage that we have. So once we have these large freeways, we can offer capacity, right? We have more
Right.
capacity, and then we need to monetize. I said we paid, billions of dollars for the. We have to monetize that. We have to grow in new areas. I think
Yeah.
we were talking the other day,
Absolutely.
Shanique, how mobile phones, it's saturated. Everyone,
Yeah.
my grandma has a smartphone. Everyone has them. And as a publicly traded company, we always got to be growing.
One.
So
Right.
we're off to the races to monetize this capacity and coverage that we got from Spectrum, and that was kind of kicked off with the 5G standard.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Anson. And look into the future too. Another thing that we were talking about, it's just the impact that it will have on these different industries because FWA has the power to provide you with secure, low latency connectivity. So think about how
Mm-hmm.
that can be applied to these IoT devices in the future. We're looking to become, we're
Oh,
advancing
excellent
with
point.
telemedicine and autonomous
Mm-hmm.
vehicles. So all of these augmented reality, virtual reality solutions that are propelling the future, FWA is going to be a very important part of ensuring that we're having fast, reliable connections because you can't have, you told me the analogy the other day, there's a surgeon on the other side of the country that's broadcasting his surgery. You need reliable, fast internet. You can't have a stagger in your connection. So there's a lot of momentum for this product, and there's a lot that can be done with it, especially where we see our sectors or societies are going right now.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And I forgot to mention the protocols that are built in the 5G standard. That's exactly what Shanique's talking about. So when they built this 5G standard, they built it for particular use cases. Particular
Right.
use cases. One that's a shocker to me is, and you mentioned it. You mentioned the ultra low latency one with the surgery, but the one that's a shocker is the massive machine to machine capacity. So the protocol they built inside the 5G standard go all the way down to the radios. The only kind of thing I can think of is like maybe a refrigerated truck or Amazon package or something that you're tracking all these things, and you have millions of them, right? You could have millions of
Right.
them connected to a tower because there's lots of these things around. It's IoT. In the LTE world, you kind of had to be careful because all
Right.
the protocols weren't there to say, for instance, to if you had a sensor or something and you were monitoring, let's say, humidity, temperature, and things like that. Now, in the 5G standard, you can do things like, hey, this IoT device, go to sleep,
Right.
and contact me in a few hours. Or if anything changes, here's a delta or here's a threshold. If the temperature changes, more 5 degrees, then contact me. But other than that, just go to sleep. Don't
Right.
even contact me. So think about that. Now you have the towers able to put things to sleep. So you're talking about battery life. You're talking about a lot more capacity because when we can, if you're in a big restaurant and you can shut
Hmm.
everybody up and say nobody
Yeah.
talk unless you have something to say about FWA, you know, or something like that. That's kind of how it is. Only when they have something to say are they speaking. So you can have a lot more people in the room, right? That
Yeah.
you can talk
That's
to.
a
So
good point.
that's kind of a weird analogy, but that's how it is.
And you're right, Anson. And the next point here we see it is spectrum. I know a little bit about like the spectrum of FWA. I know about the bands and it goes up to 2.1 gigahertz for those rural or suburban areas and up to 2.6 gigahertz for urban areas. So massive improvement from our legacy broadband technology. Obviously, FWA is compatible with any radio frequency, but every MNO, every company is different with how they're going to access those frequencies with their wireless technology services. So huge improvements there on the broadband coverage space. Anson, anything to add to that spectrum?
I think you got it. I mean, definitely. I just like to think of it again. 5G standard brought 100 lane freeways, and the FCC reacted by bringing all this spectrum back so they could lease it out or sell it to MNOs like us. We bought a bunch. T-Mobile, you got to call a spade here. They were first to the party, right? They bought
Right,
Sprint, and they were able to grab that mid band, that 2.5 that they had over there at Sprint, and they had tried, I think, WiMAX or something like that, but it failed. But they had that spectrum, so T-Mobile bet the farm on Sprint, and they purchased Sprint, and they were first to the party as far as mid-band stuff. And then
right.
people can say we were first to the party on millimeter wave, but you have to have both of those. So Sprint
Yeah.
had the spectrum. They bought it from Sprint, so they went off to the races on mid-band. We had the spectrum in the millimeter wave, so we went off to the races. Now we're building our mid-band. They're building their millimeter wave. So everyone's doing the same thing.
Everyone's
You
doing
know,
the
in
same
fact, that
thing.
brings
Yeah.
up an interesting point. AT&T, what is it, Stanky over there? I forget the guy's name. But they were saying not but a year ago, look, we're not going to do this FWA thing. Let Verizon, T-Mobile duke it out. We'll kind of keep an eye on it. But, we're a fiber company. We want to sell our not our Fios. We want to sell our Uverse, and we're going to dabble. We're going to keep our mobile network going, and things like that. Well, they did show up to the party at auction 105 or 106 when the C-band was auctioned off, and they got a couple of slivers there from
Right.
C-band, I think in the B blocks and the C blocks. And they said they were just going to fill in capacity, and they were going to do FWA. And lo and behold, last month they come out with AT&T Air,
Yeah.
and they say,
Yeah.
"Oh, mea culpa. Did we really say we weren't going to do that? No, no, no. We're going to do it."
Yeah, they
So
gotta do it.
everybody's on board. Everybody's doing it. We need to monetize we need to grow. This is the growth area. Period.
So in this slide, we're just going to do a feature comparison between fixed wireless access versus traditional broadband. So we're going to touch on some top points such as their speed, agility, their redundancy. We're going to expound on that a little bit more and just highlight the differences that exist between the two. Like, what are the expectations? What can you expect when you're provisioning or utilizing these two connections? So go ahead, Ensign, with taking us into the speeds.
Okay, speed. So I put mostly asymmetrical here because LTE and 5G, they are asymmetrical. All right. We get about 10% upload that we get from download. So if you have a download here, like a 200 or something like that, you can probably most likely get about 20 up. And that's kind of the percentage that we use as far as telling the folks what they're going to get or what to expect. Now, on the speeds in the traditional broadband area over here, that's still been a thing. You on cable and things like that, it's still asymmetrical in nature. However, fiber is king. We all know that. But in the fiber world, there are symmetrical tiers to purchase. So that's one difference there. You could say maybe fiber has the upper hand. But when we're talking about 5G millimeter wave, hey, we're getting pretty symmetrical. We're getting pretty high uploads and pretty high downloads too. Again, not symmetrical, still asymmetrical, but more percentage than 10%, like we see on the 5G C-band or LTE. So, yeah, anything else I missed there, Shanique, or you want
No,
to say
just
about that?
a good call out on the speeds. I mean, you mentioned earlier that legacy broadband is good for those content creators like yourself because you get that fast upload speed as opposed to with FWA. But sometimes it begs the question, do you actually really need all of that all of that speed as a consumer as opposed to just a business? So very important considerations there. And the next thing I want to jump into is just that deployment agility. So fixed wireless access is by far the most efficient solution that you will implement in comparison to legacy broadband. So customers, they can expect that fast turnaround because all they will need is that connectivity and devices or the accessories, and then there will be little to no on-site installation there. Legacy broadband, on the other hand, so we're thinking cable, the wait time for these services can be very lengthy because if there is a wired infrastructure that already exists at that site, it can take several weeks for these services to be deployed. So you're thinking doing those site surveys, you're thinking about qualifying to make sure that you can have the connection where you want it to do with the installation of your devices. And if the wired infrastructure does not exist, then the deployment can take several months, even years. So you have to wait for those equipments to come
Yeah.
and get approved and install. And it depends on also on the size, the deployment size and your location, as I mentioned before. Anything to add there, Anson, just to add a bit more color to that?
Well, I do want to say that, and I forgot to mention statistics, 75% of new broadband connections are FWA. So that's remarkable because we have deployment agility, right? We can
Right,
basically go to the internet, order the thing, and it's going to show up the next day. And we put
right.
it up. So there is no guy coming in, have to come in your house or your business and run the
Oh, I hate
cable and where
that.
the cables are, stuff like that. So yeah, this deployment agility thing is definitely a thing, and there's so many different aspects to it, and I think that's why people like it.
Yep, very flexible, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, no annual contract. So this has been a thing. Let me talk about this side first. So the traditional broadband and with cable, people bellyache about this for years. You get a 12-month lock-in promotional tier or promotional pricing, and let's say it's you get a 100 meg tier or something like that, and it's $55 a month. At the end of that 12 months, you're still in contract, and then it goes to right
Yeah.
150 or something like kind of
Oh,
behind the
yeah.
scenes. And I think secretly, I think maybe cable providers. Hopefully, you don't notice that, but
Yeah.
$100 more, usually notice that in today's economy. So that's what, again, I think is driving this 75% of broadband connections being on the FWA side. When you say no contract, that's very alluring. Whenever you have no contract, you always have that little out. Man, if I can't
Hmm.
afford this, I'm going to cut back. Maybe I just use my phone or something like that. Now,
Right.
businesses aren't going to do that, but it just lends that growth factor over to the FWA because no contracts, and then you pay month to month, and there is no balloon,
Hmm.
right? So there's
Yep.
no at the end of 12 months, I'm finished with this promotional pricing, and I go to some other pricing. Now, could that change? Yes, it could change. But right now we have so much capacity, T-Mobile and us and AT&T as well. We're competing. We're fighting. We're duking it out for FWA customers because that's the new thing. We got to monetize all this spectrum that we've purchased that we talked about in the other slide.
Yeah, that's a good call out. Brings into play that flexibility. I mean, you mentioned to me earlier that if you get that FWA router and you don't like it, you don't need FWA anymore, you can just return it. You don't have to keep it around.
Yeah.
You don't have to pay for it anymore, so you're not locked in. I mean, I was a victim of those balloon contracts. Started out when they were having a special, then my my bill went up $100 the next year.
Oh
So
goodness, yeah, that's crazy, right? That's an
right.
ouchie in today's economy, huh?
It is. The next point there you'll see is that with FWA, you do have those distinctions of those limited data plans with the LTE offerings, but with our 5G offerings, you have that unlimited data plan. So you do have that flexibility there. You can make the decisions on, well, if I don't need unlimited data, you have a wide variety of options. On the other hand, with the traditional broadband, there's some limited data plans on some providers, and I'm sure Anson has a story to tell us around that. But I'll give you an example. There are other providers, however, that do not have that data cap restriction. So, for example, Verizon Fios, you don't have those data caps, you don't have those restrictions there. So there's still that flexibility. It's kind of twofolded here because both options offer you that kind of flexibility when it comes on to those data plans. Anything to add there, Anson?
Yeah, I do have a story, and this story comes from my own. So my wife and I moved out to the country long ago, and so the only thing that we had was FWA, and then Starlink came along, so we started doing some Starlink stuff. But about 2 months ago, they finally, Spectrum, not Spectrum, but well, I won't name them, but a
Yep.
cable company came in, laid cable, and we were just, everyone in the neighborhood's just super excited. Finally, we're going to have high speed, this is going to be great. And of course, I was one of the first ones on it, right? And I got, a 200 meg tier or something like that. That was going to be enough for us. And the first month went okay. We're excited. The kids' school is going better. They do some online school stuff. Everything's going great. The second month, I start getting these texts and some emails saying, hey, I'm approaching my data cap limit. And they don't mention the data cap when you're buying the service, right? It's in the fine print. So sure
Right.
enough, there's a data cap. I think it was 1 terabyte or something like that. So I'm like, oh no, maybe I should have went with another tier.
Right.
Obviously, I just need to get the next highest tier. So I don't want to get charged for overages on these data caps. So I call in, hey, I want to go the next tier. I think the next tier was 400 meg or something like that. So I'm just about to close the deal, right? Okay, 400 meg was like $20 more. I still get the promotional pricing, so all's good. And then I said, oh, wait a minute, before I pull the trigger on this, what's my data cap now? Mr. Garcia, your data cap is the same.
It's the
So
same.
I'm like, well, wait a minute. I'm going faster, but I get the
Right.
same amount of data. I'm just going to get there. I'm just going to get my data cap faster,
Faster,
basically.
right.
So yeah, so you got to
Yeah.
watch these things,
You
and that's been some bad juju that the cable providers have as well. So yeah, so you got to watch these things, and you
you
got
gotta
to
watch it.
understand and look at the fine print, I guess is what I'm saying.
That's, yeah, that's a good call out.
Okay, and that takes us into the next bullet, the built-in redundancy and multi-tower. What do we mean by this? So this is really neat, and I have a story about this one too. So
Yep.
built-in redundancy, when I started playing around with FWA, one of the things I noticed in my routers is I would have connectivity to 2, sometimes 3 towers. And I
Right.
would kind of scratch my head on that, but it made perfect sense. We're an MNO, we're a mobile network operator, right? When we built and we laid the foundation for this network, it had to be coast to coast. You had to
Right.
have phones that were going to be able to have data and calling in San Francisco and also in Maine, right? And everything in
Right.
between. So one of the things that you have to do is you got to, have all these protocols and all this technology where you hand off to other towers. So immediately when you go FWA, in most cases, you're going to have connectivity to several towers. And so you have
Mm.
that multi-tower redundancy. One tower goes out down, it's just going to pass you off to the next tower, even though that tower may be further away, maybe less power, maybe you'll get a little less speed. You never know. But you
Right.
have multiple avenues to exit or, for transmitting and receiving. And
Yeah.
we all know, on this side of the house, no reliability and diversity of last mile, right? You're not going to pull 2 cables. Your cable company or your internet provider, if you're a business, is not going to pull 2 cables. Now, in some
Yeah.
big campuses, yes, that is a thing. They'll have fiber diversity and things like that, but your normal business is not going to get anything like this. So, and that's going to
Right.
cost a lot of money also. They're not going
Yeah.
to do that for free. But we have
That's a
it
good
built
call out.
in the mobile network, which we're putting FWA on.
Yeah. That's a good call out, Anson. We know FWA offers the true redundancy and diversity. And another thing to call out is those environmental factors too. Like FWA is less susceptible to those outages from like storms because you do have that redundancy. The
Yeah.
failover is going to go to the next tower. With our legacy broadband options, they're a lot more susceptible to these errors and environmental factors. So your tower could get knocked out by a storm, a tornado in your area, and the same thing happened to me when I was living abroad. Our tower would get knocked out by a storm. We would be out of connectivity for weeks, even months. And even with the cable cutters, they would cut our lines and take the cables that would leave us without connections for a good amount of
Wow.
time. So goes back to that like agility too, that deployment agility, because it takes time for them to implement these infrastructures again. It takes weeks or even months if errors occur, if something happens there. So good call out.
Yeah, one more. I have a little story on this, and I'll just shoehorn it in here. I had the opportunity to go with the tower crew, and the tower crew, we're going to modernize a macro. So we're going to get 5G, C-band, CBRS. We're going to do all this stuff. So one day we, went and put all the radios up, all the co-located radios and things like that. And what they do is they move the old antennas up and put all the new antennas up, put all the new equipment in the shack. And then
Right.
the week after, then we come in and do a cutover. So I was very interested in that cutover. And long story short, I'm sitting there, I'm talking to the Samsung guy, he's programming this thing and they're just about to do the cutover. They're going to shut down the whole tower. And so I'm outside looking at my phone and I go inside and say, "What, have you done it yet?" And he said, "Oh yeah, we've already, this tower shut down." I said, "No, no, no. I'm still connected. My phone's still working." And he says, "Oh no, no, that's coming from the other towers." So they turned up the power on the other adjacent towers to make sure there was coverage so no one lost connectivity. So obviously there were some people that were using their phones and things in that
Right.
area. Maybe there was some FWA there too, hopefully. But they're not going to, they're upgrading a whole tower. No one got disconnected. And when I asked him about that, I was like, "Oh, I didn't even think of that. I thought like everyone in the community or everyone connected to this tower, everything's going to go down." He said, "Oh, no, no, no. We don't do that. Everyone's got to stay up.
Right.
100% uptime here. We can't do that." So we increase the power in the adjacent towers, bring this tower down, upgrade it, move the fiber over. They had to move the fiber over like a couple of racks and they put it in.
Mhm.
And the whole time I'm still connected. Everyone around the area is still connected. So that's kind of cool.
Good flexibility with the FWA. And then the last point we have here is just that availability option. So with FWA, we do have that nationwide availability, and this lends back to when we were talking about that deployment agility. It takes a matter of hours for this to be tuned up and installed, and that's because we have that nationwide availability. With traditional broadband, on the other hand, there are certain build out maturity that is in certain areas. And we'll have, it goes back again to deployment agility. It takes time for these infrastructures to be qualified. You have to do like those site surveys. So obviously there are going to be certain areas that are a lot well more suited for these implementations. You'll hear, and I know Anson, you mentioned this a lot about FWA being that rural lover because you are
Yeah,
able to
yeah.
get this connection, this connectivity out in these areas that normally would not qualify for those traditional broadband connection services. Anything to add there, Anson?
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious out there. If you look around the nation, right, Shanique, we have we have even us, our
Hmm.
fiber, let's say, we're very strong in certain markets or certain geographic areas, right?
Right.
AT&T fiber is strong in certain areas, and
Yep.
Charter is strong in certain areas. But here, this is very different because we built an MNO network. We're a mobile network operator. We built this with this nationwide network to begin
Right.
with. Your phone had to work in San Francisco, it had to work in Maine, everywhere in between. So when we put FWA on top of that, we already have nationwide availability. There's
Availability.
no
Yep.
areas that we're stronger at, and maybe you want to go with some other FWA provider over here or some other FWA provider over here. It's coast to coast. That's what we built to begin with. So there's a differentiation here between the traditional broadband and FWA. So I want to call out, and people talk about one contract or one bill. I want the same bill for broadband or for FWA that I have over here in San Francisco, and it's the same bill I get in Maine or whatever.
So in the previous slide, we were mentioning and we were talking about those differences that exist in speeds between our wireless, fixed wireless access, as well as our legacy broadband, so our wireline connectivities or connections. And this is just a sample performance reference slide that I dug up, and we're able to see just the differences that exist in those download and upload speeds with our wired connections versus our wireless connections. So some things I want to call out here is that most broadband services, they are considered variable speed, and that basically means that various environmental conditions and other things may impact the speed at any time. So here you'll see the median performances for wired broadband DSL, you'll see cable, fiber, all of these referenced in the chart here. They reflect the aggregate of the major US carriers as measured by the FCC. And on the other hand, you'll see our mobile wireless average performances that are referenced, and these are the aggregates of the major US carriers as measured by speed test. At the bottom there, you'll see our Verizon LTE Business Internet. So that performance or sample performance reference is based upon averages that were taken by us in our lab, so lab tests that were conducted at a single location. And then our 5G Business Internet speeds, those were based upon customer trials at 9 locations. So the bottom two with our fixed wireless access, those were tests that were conducted by our internal team. Another thing, I mentioned it earlier, variable speed. So it's important to note that these are only a sample reference, and factors such as their network load, the distance to the data centers, environmental factors, all of these play an impact, or all of these have an impact on the performance of the connection at any given time. So very important to highlight and note that the speed is very dependent on location and where you are, and all of these other factors come into play there.
Yeah, one other thing we want to point out here is also this 5G business internet was both C-band and millimeter wave. Those together, this is kind of the averages that we get. And one other thing, I was looking at this earlier and I saw, and I wanted to call out, look at this upload. Average upload here is 100 meg. Well, look at what the fiber average upload is, 100. So yes, FWA is a thing. It's pretty solid, pretty good, pretty fast.
So on this slide here, we're just talking about that speed to deploy. In the prior slide, when we were doing our feature comparison, we mentioned that deployment agility, and we were talking about FWA and the offerings that it has, because the connection can be tuned up and installed in a matter of hours. So on this slide here, we're just going through some of the equipment that you will need, as well as the different options that Verizon as a provider offers with FWA deployment. So as you can see from the slide, all FWA connections require some hardware with our LTE business internet, but if it's the 5G business internet, then you'll need a chipset for that. And with our different offerings, we have that professional installation where someone will come out and provide that installation for you. And we also have that plug and play option where we'll send you that equipment. We'll send you detailed instructions, walk you through step-by-step DIY, how you can install this yourself. And it's ideal for any customer on the consumer side, on the business side. Anyone can take advantage of these resources because, as I mentioned, these are very simple and they're easy instructions to understand. And then the last thing that we have here is that customers can do the BYOD option, which is they can bring their compatible device and we'll configure that up and have that installation up and running. So you'll have your connection up and running in a matter of hours. And I want to call out, we mentioned the differences in deployment agility, and with the legacy broadband, the installation looks a lot different because we'll have to conduct those site surveys to see if the appropriate wired infrastructure exists. And then we have to wait on our wireline equipment. We have to wait for them to be approved. We have to wait for them to be installed. So the deployment, it's very lengthy. As we mentioned earlier, it takes a long time. There's a lot more flexibility that is there or available with FWA, with fixed wireless access or other wireless access options.
Yeah, Shani, that's good. I mean, I'm gonna add some color to the professional installation and the plug and play. All right, and let me do the plug
Mhm.
and play first. So I was just at a business just the other day. It was a motorcycle business. You know, they fixed motorcycles and sold motorcycles and UTVs and things like that. And when I was walking in there, talking to the secretary, I looked down and there was a Verizon phone there, and I said, "Hey, that's a One Talk phone. I have a One Talk phone right here." So I knew exactly what it looked like, and I said, "Oh, well, that's going over the internet." I said, "Oh, what's your internet provider?" And she looked up and just pointed to a business FWA router and said, "Oh, it's Verizon because it says Verizon right there, and that's I know
Okay.
that's our internet router." So I was like,
Right.
"Oh, who came set that up?" She said, "Oh, we ordered it and they sent it to us and we connected it up. It's easy breezy. It's
Right.
wireless here, and we have an Ethernet connection to one of our switches too. We have a couple of printers." So I was like, "Oh, okay, this is the perfect example for a plug and play self setup on the business side." Right? Because it was
Right.
good enough. They had a couple of PCs, they had a couple of printers, they were doing point of sale stuff, they had some online business software or something like that, but they weren't doing a lot. Also, the One Talk phones are over the internet, so they were using those as well. I could see very clearly. I walked outside, I'm looking at motorcycles, and there's a tower fairly close. I know that's our tower. So they did a plug and play self
Plug
setup
and play.
solution
Yep.
there at that place, and it was perfect for them. Now, the professional installation, why would you want to do a professional installation? Well, if you're really after C-band and maximum speeds, both down and up, remember there's no SLAs on this. You get a 300 meg plan, you might get 300, you might get 200, 10% of that, you might get 30, you might get 20, you never know. But if you want to maximize that, there's two things you got to consider. How far you are from the tower, from the
Right.
Verizon tower, that's path loss. When you shout at the top of a tower, the further you're away from the tower, the less you're going to hear, so to speak. So it's
Hmm.
kind of the same concept. And then also noise. So noise plays a particularly large role as well. And the only way I can kind of analogize that is being if you're in a building or in a restaurant, you're talking to your friend, the restaurant's packed,
Right.
you can barely hear your friend. But if that
Right.
same restaurant was outdoors and you were an outdoor venue, you could hear them much better. And the reason for
Right.
that is because all the bouncing of the waves on the walls.
Yeah.
So the same exists for FWA. Sometimes you're going to want to be outside. You want that antenna
Yeah.
outside. And when it's outside, you're always going to get the best reception. You're going to get less noise. Less noise, best reception equals faster speeds or closer to what tier you've purchased. All right, so I just wanted to call those two things out. Okay, let me draw a typical broadband customer network. And I'm going to draw we'll put HQ over here. Maybe they have a LAN. They could have some servers out here, maybe a database or two. And then that's going to be a wired connection into broadband. So it's going to be Wild Wild West out here. That's going to be the internet. And then I'm going to draw a couple of remotes out here. I think we got some good Cisco routers out here. All right, and each one of these guys have some LANs over here. We won't do any backup or anything like that. Just typical little broadband. And these are PB. Get the picture here.
Yeah.
Okay, now Shanique, this is your typical, small, medium business kind of network. Now,
Right.
if we wanted to secure something like this, kind of how would we do it?
That's a good question, Ensign. So you see all those little remote sites right there. Say, for example, they want to communicate with a branch office or the headquarters. You'd
Mhm.
have to install individual IPsec tunnels. This is specific to probably like DSL from the remote office 1 to the headquarters, remote office 2 to
Right.
the headquarters, and
Okay. So
remote
wait,
office
hold
3.
on. You're jumping ahead of me. You're saying I got to do that, and if I want to do site to site, I got to do IPsec tunnel like that.
You gotta do, yep.
Okay, let me finish
And you
spelling
have
that
to
out.
do that for
Hold
all
on,
of them.
I'm going to do that. I'm going to do this. Okay, there's a lot of IPsec tunnels there I got to manage.
You
Um,
gotta,
okay,
you gotta draw
okay,
that
and
out.
do I have? Oh wait, I'm missing one. How does how does this site right here communicate to? Oh, I got to do this here. Okay. Wow. One, two, three, four, five.
Yep.
Individual IPsec tunnels, I think, and then I got to manage each of those in each location, each end of that. Okay.
Exactly.
All right. That's a lot
Exactly.
of IPsec tunnels. Okay. What if we had uh, what if we had AWS, Azure, or something like that? What are we going to do
Mm.
there? I guess I should draw that over here, huh?
Right. If you had a
CSP up here.
CSP. Hmm.
Okay. It's hanging off the internet. So let's put AWS. And maybe we have Azure out here too.
I mean, so you're looking at the same thing, right? You're still gonna need those encryptions. You're gonna need that additional virtual private network layer over your network layer to offer that protection. So you're gonna need probably those IPsec tunnels again. So going from um, remote off remote branch
Boy.
one to Azure,
So we got
remote
to
branch
do,
one to
uh,
AWS.
okay, and this go, okay. So I'm going to draw this. And,
Right.
okay, I'm going to keep going here.
Visual aids.
I get everything. Oh, no, no, I didn't got the headquarters. Headquarters can't talk to Azure. Hold on, I got to do this, and then I got to do this over here. That's a lot of, that's a lot to manage, I would think, in a router, all these IPsec tunnels and passwords. And if you're doing certificate-based stuff, you got to manage all those
Right.
certificates on and on and on.
Right.
So
Exactly.
this is not good. I mean, that seems pretty
Exactly.
complex to me, just
It
from a
is
simpleton
complex.
standpoint. So you're going to take us through because you have something here that we're going to look at. Tell me a little bit about this and why is this different?
So with this solution or this architecture that we're seeing here, you see that the customer has their MPLS network, which we call PIP, and this is that wired connection on that right-hand side. And on the wireless side, you see that they have this NPN or the Customer Mobile Private Network. And what that is, it's basically a private business network that interconnects all the customers' wireless sites together, right? So you see that with these integration of FWA and NPN to PIP, it simply means that now all of these customer branches, all of these sites are able to easily and privately communicate with each other through this gateway,
When
right?
you say private,
So
that means I don't have any IPsec tunnels. So I'm not managing
no,
feature configuration on these routers. Okay, got it.
right, no IPsec
That's
tunnels
nice.
needed. No IPsec tunnels needed there. And I want to, this is a good design, or it's something good to call out because we know that in this case we have Verizon as the provider. So the customer's intelligence infrastructure that's built out from end to end. So from their wired headquarters to all the way up to their wireless branches, right? And this all allows for that end-to-end security as well as that QoS. And what I mean by QoS is that quality of service. So I highlight this because particularly for customers who are looking to prioritize video and VoIP technologies, this solution would work great for them because with here, you're able to see that it has that traffic management and traffic priority. And what I mean by this is that they use QoS markings or QoS class identifiers or QCIs, and they're able to assess those IP packets on the network that will be able to prioritize that VoIP or that video traffic, which in turn may solve a lot of problems for customers who are looking to prioritize this, but they are not able to have that reliable connections, right?
Well, as a UC guy, let me double click on that because this is interesting to me. So it used to be that we used to sell our customers on the concept of our of Verizon MPLS network, our PIP network, and we would, all these remote sites, we would say, hey, you got to connect all these remote sites off of here, and then if you have, let's draw a little phone here, if you have VoIP phones hanging off here, and wherever this VoIP was transmitted to, if it was stayed within our network here, it was going to be prioritized. It'd be put in an important bucket. So these frames, these packets going across the network, were always going to be given priority. And we know that's
Right.
important with voice and video. Now you're adding another concept. So you're adding a whole nother network over here. And you're saying that we're able to do this priority thingy. So I can have now a phone over here on an FWA branch, and that priority is going to, or that voice video is going to stick with priority all the way across to this network. Maybe it's going to headquarters, maybe it's going to the branch office, maybe they're doing site-to-site calls, whatever. Maybe they have a platform like Genesis or call center platform over here. So we're going to make sure that QoS stays prioritized. That's pretty good. I like that. As a UC guy, I always want QoS. Definitely.
Right. I mean,
Now,
and customers want it too. Like, the customers want to ensure, and I want to bring up another point as well. So with the MPLS network, you can have that traffic priority, you can have that priority management. But another thing that I want to point out is even if your customer is using FWA as a sort of backup connection or backup connectivity or failover, say for example, their MPLS network is experiencing some sort of downtime. If the traffic fails over to FWA, you still will have that priority management or that QoS. So they're
stop
able
there.
to still
I want to
prioritize.
draw that out. I want to draw
Okay.
that out. So you're saying you're bringing something new in here, and you're saying if we have this is we'll call this branch 1, and we have this branch, and we have something there, and we have PIP, right? Verizon PIP, and I don't know, maybe we have a headquarters over here, HQ, and we want to we have PIP there also. So this is wired, and that's wired, and we have
Right,
QoS going across here. So we have any phones over here, any VoIP going across to any VoIP over here. It's going to
right.
be good. It's going to prioritize. Now you're adding something else into it. You're adding another connection, but we're going this way, and we're going. Let me draw my little easy tower here, right? And we're going to go this way. Let's pick purple. I like purple. Kind of this is the backup connection, but it still
Right.
goes to the same place. And you're saying that these little red packets that are going to go from this phone this way are always going to be prioritized. But
Right.
if this goes away, you're saying we go this way and we're still
Still
prioritized.
prioritize. Exactly. Still
That's
prioritized.
good. That's awesome. Again, as a UC
Um,
guy, I like that.
You like that? Yeah, I think it's, and it's a good thing to note too, especially if that is video and VoIP technology, something that your corporation or you as a consumer is prioritizing. You know that you'll still have that quality of service and you'll have that end-to-end security at the end of the day. And another thing too, Ensign, if you go back to our little diagram there, I want to point out, I mentioned that end-to-end security. And I mentioned the fact that Verizon has built out this intelligence infrastructure from one point A to point B. One of the disadvantages that I see a lot with broadband, legacy broadband, like wirelines, for example, cable, if you look at the consumer's infrastructure or architecture, different segments are handled by different providers in most cases. So, for example, your
Oh yeah.
CPE might be handled by someone else. Your hub or your head-end might be handled by someone else. And then your ISP core might be handled by someone else. So that in turn impacts that reliable service as well as that security because it's not guaranteed from end to end because of all of these handoffs and segments that are within the network.
Yeah, with broadband, it's just internet, it's wild, wild west. So you're saying this guy, Verizon, managed by Verizon, that connection managed by Verizon, this whole network managed by
Exactly.
Verizon, this whole wired network managed by Verizon, that router managed by Verizon, that router managed by Verizon, and so on and so forth. Right? So
Exactly.
this is one throat to choke, one bill. I think this would
Yeah,
resonate with many customers out there for sure.
exactly.
Talk to me about
Exactly.
this stuff here because the other thing we had to do, like these tech tunnels and all this stuff, if we had servers up in Azure and things like that, what
Exactly. So,
does this do, or does this create any more simplicity for us?
yeah, it does. So when we were doing the drawing previously, we were talking about the fact that what if the customer wants to connect their users or branches to AWS or to Azure? You have to implement those additional layer of security over their network and form that connection or bridge that connection between the two things. With this technology or with this architecture, you are able to simply connect users to the CSPs, to the cloud service providers. So there isn't any additional hassle or step that you need to take to kind of implement that connection between the two, because it's wireless, right? So you purchase that SCI within our ecosystem and you're able to connect your users. I like to bring up the example of if a customer had 500 users and they wanted all 500 users to be connected to AWS, if they were using that wireline broadband, they would have to establish 500 individual connections to AWS, which is not quite scalable, right? But if they are on this FWA network, then there's no need to establish individual connections there. And say, for example, they add another CSP, they add Azure, or they add Oracle or someone. They don't need to establish again those individual connections because their users can simply connect to those CSPs, that cloud architecture. So very scalable and very easy to operate and manage, in my opinion.
I like that. So you're saying if I would dumb that down for me to understand, once I buy this connection from Verizon to my AWS, and maybe I'm running some containers and my own homegrown applications out there, whatever, once it's connected to my private network, wired or wireless,
Exactly.
people can access it.
People can access it.
I already have it. And if I bring up another remote site over here, same thing, right?
Exactly. Same thing. Easy to access.
Yeah, this is good stuff. This greatly reduces, I mean, even in I know this will rustle some feathers, but even in the SD-WAN, and all the cool kids are wearing the SD-WAN stuff, right? Like skinny jeans. But there are lots of benefits to SD-WAN for sure.
Exactly.
But
Right.
for simplicity, if you wanted security, privacy, and QoS and things like, I always think it's funny, but people do QoS in SD-WAN.
Oh, yeah.
And I always just give me hard. Again, I'm a UC guy. And
Right.
when I say UC and I see priority QoS, I'm talking wired line. I'm talking dedicated priority queues. We know how much voice is going through there. And then this thing
Right.
came along, SD-WAN, not knocking it, but it goes over broadband. And that broadband connection, yes, you can do QoS on these IPsec tunnels,
Right.
but you still got the Wild Wild West you're riding
You can.
over.
Exactly.
So there's no
Exactly.
guarantee, in the Wild
There's
Wild
no.
West. However, you're saying here on the private network, we got QoS on the wireless side. Private network wired side, we have QoS. We can really guarantee not only security, but QoS. That's
Exactly.
magnificent. I love it. Okay, Shanique, we just talked about the CSPs and how all these wired and wireless people or connections can connect up to them, like one to many. We haven't talked about this www there. I assume that's the internet.
It's the internet. Yep.
What do we got there?
So similar, the connection works similarly. However, in order to keep that connection private, you have a Verizon hosted firewall that is implemented that kind of maintains or separates that public from the private traffic. And it works similar with the CSPs too, because if you have your 500 existing users, they can all connect to the internet via the secure firewall. And then if you have an additional user that is implemented, so 501 users, they automatically will get connected to that internet. They can get access to that internet. All of this traffic is being routed through that firewall. So the public traffic from the internet routed through the firewall makes it, comes in as private traffic to your network.
Outstanding. So we have, as Verizon, we have a little firewall here. I'm going to throw my little brick wall there. There's my firewall. And
Right.
now we got connection now. Obviously, these guys can connect to the internet. And then you just said that all these guys can connect to the internet as well. And if we
Right.
bring new guys up here, they can connect to the internet.
The thing that I want to call out is that this is going to be there's just securing your traffic from the internet. You know, the internet is a public place. You want to have your private network and you want to have the traffic being routed into your network as private. So in order to maintain that security and enhance your security policies or maintain those policies that you have, then you can integrate this firewall just to maintain that integrity of your network.
Perfect. I really like this because we're building something one time, CSP
Right.
connections, and now, just like you said, the internet connection. And then as we bring up wired or wireless sites using PIP or the FWA MPN to PIP architecture over there on
Right.
the left, bingo, we have access to everything. Our remote
Exactly.
sites, our branch sites, the internet, our CSP connections, so on and so forth. Outstanding. I love it. I'll buy two.
That'll take three.
Okay, let's wrap this up in a big red bow for the folks, Shanique. FWA versus FWA PIP. Use case comparison. We have a couple of things here: speed, complexity, deployment, agility, resiliency, cloud, friendliness, and totals. So let's go with the not 1 to 5. Let's go with the gold stars and the X's. Okay, let's talk about the first one, speed. What do you got to say about speed with broadband, Shanique?
So I think with broadband, they offer the legacy broadband, at least wireline broadband, offers the most asymmetrical speeds. So as we mentioned in the prior slides that we were in the first couple of minutes of this recording, it was that like with the download speeds here are going to be higher than the upload speeds. And I think fiber offers quite the competitive advantage here in speeds also, because if you remember that chart that we showed earlier with the different speeds that exist, in terms of upload speed, fiber does give FWA quite the run for its money. So even staying on the topic of fiber, because of its ability to handle that greater bandwidth, it will in turn offer that lower latency, which will provide a smoother and more responsive experience, especially for those folks out there who like online gaming or they like those video conferencing in real time. I think this definitely offers you great speed components or capabilities.
Yeah, right, for that. And then I know there's some, fiber's king, right? There's definitely some symmetrical people doing 5 gig now, up and down. So,
Right.
we can't match that in FWA, but you know what? The industry cannot, consumers cannot be wrong. The biggest
Right.
growth in broadband connections is in FWA, period, full stop. I mean, we
Right.
just got our quarter Q3 results today. I listened to the AT&T one. I'm going to listen to T-Mobile's tomorrow, but they're going to kill it also. They've been killing it with FWA. So people like FWA. Yes, asymmetrical speeds, but good enough for what they're using it for. So in this respect, I mean, I'm going to have to call a spade, and we'll give the gold star to broadband because fiber to the premise, hey, 2 gig, 1 gig, symmetrical. Look, we can't match that. That's for sure. All right, let's
Exactly.
talk about complexity. Oh, this one we talked a lot about already.
Yeah,
Complexity and
we
broadband.
way more complex than FWA. We talked about you did the drawings with those IPsec tunnels. If you want to have privacy and security, you have to install those additional layers on top of your network. So it's way more complex in terms of infrastructure and installation with in terms of the technology that has to be implemented and hard to
Okay.
manage.
Yeah, so all those red lines just come in my mind. So I have to give this one, um, I'm going to give this one some X's here.
A
I'm going to
little
give him
X, yeah.
3 X's right there. And FWA, when we talk about FWA and traditional FWA broadband, because there's FWA broadband, which you could do the same thing with broadband, right?
Right.
I'm going to give it an X2 because you'll still have the same complexity. However,
Exactly.
on the last guy over here, we definitely saw that all that security, that's private networking. So I'm
Right.
giving this guy definitely the gold stars for sure. I'm giving him 3 gold stars because that's our product. So in fact, I'm going to fill that up with gold stars because I like that product. Okay, deployment agility on
Um,
broadband. What do you think
I
there? We're
mean,
talking wired
Anson,
broadband there.
we talked about it in the first couple of slides here. When you're looking in terms of the building out that infrastructure, right? It takes weeks and even months to decide, okay, does the infrastructure exist here at the customer location? And then you have to order that equipment. You have to make sure that it's deployed to the customer location. And then even if the infrastructure does not exist, you have to wait months for that to be implemented and built out. So in terms of agility, not very agile, not very feasible if for someone who wants to have a quick deployment and something up and running in a matter of hours or days.
Okay, so you would definitely give that an X.
An X,
Okay.
definitely.
Well, I get the FWA one. So we already know you talked about that. Order it. It shows up. Throw it in a window. Throw it in a windowsill. Throw it in your data center, whatever, and or your data closet, and it's going to work. And these things are very quick to deploy. You just need
Exactly.
a SIM. We've kind of, let's say, greased the skids on that infrastructure, right? We're in M&O.
Right.
We've been doing this with phones all this time, and we're just moving over to a different, what we call user equipment. So
Right.
we've greased the skids. We have that infrastructure. We have all the cogs in place to turn up a phone right away. And a phone is just another UE as far as we're concerned. So we can turn this up very, very quickly. You can move it very, very quickly if you want to. I think we gave the scenario of a kiosk or something in a mall, right? You're on the north side of the
Yeah.
mall one month, and you're on the south side of the mall next month, and you're east side next month. You can move
Right.
around very easily. So we're going to give this definitely. I'm going to give this 2 gold stars, and that just carries right into this. I'm going to go
A lot
right
of gold
into
stars.
2 gold stars to that guy too. Okay,
Exactly.
so resiliency. Oh, this is a good one. Good one. Okay,
I mean,
resiliency on broadband.
I'm gonna start off with my X there because we know that it's with wireline. We know with wires, with cable wires, we talked about that fiber cut too. It's not very resilient because some of the wireline technologies can easily be taken out by natural disasters or any environmental conditions
Yeah.
can impact those signals and signal strength. So not very resilient in terms of the environmental factors and also just in terms of the infrastructure as well, because there's also that wear and tear element. So I'll definitely have to give that an X. As much as I want to support my broadband, my legacy broadband or wireline broadband, I'm gonna have to give it an X there.
Yeah, and so much venom out there. I think I mentioned earlier in the video, so much venom for the cable companies. So many of
Yeah.
these cable companies have been incumbents and the only provider in certain, and they've just, they've lost the ball as
Yep.
far as consumer sentiment. And again, you go on Reddit, you can just see reams and reams of people complaining, and agents hanging up on them. They don't even care. It's just,
Right.
it's wild. We're here in the M&O. I mean, we're fighting tooth and nail for subscribers, and
Yeah,
that's our
exactly.
culture. It's inbred in us. Our culture is keep every subscriber and grab more subscribers, right? We do this thing called churn. So if you're ever reading about earnings calls and things like that in the cable segment, you'll never hear them talk about churn. But in MNOs, wireless companies, we're very concerned about churn. We don't like when people
Exactly.
disconnect because we know if they disconnect, they're going to the other guy. So we do everything we
Right.
can to keep those customers happy. Okay, so resiliency. The story I have there, I think I threw it out there already, but that's that story where you can be connected to several towers at one time. One tower can go down, and you'll just be connected to another tower. I think I gave
Exactly. That failover.
story
Yeah.
on the upgrading a tower, and they brought the tower down, and I was outside thinking my little bars were going to go away, and I'm like, wait a minute, you didn't bring this tower
I
down. I
still
see my
I
bars
still have
there.
your
And, oh
bars.
no, 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 that's from the other. We shut towers down. You switched over. Okay, so let's see who wins this one. I'm gonna have to say both of
Yeah.
these guys, right?
Yeah. Gold
Gold
star.
star, right? Okay,
Exactly.
cloud friendly. What does that
I
mean, Shane?
mean, So we talked about it a little bit in the previous slide too, in terms of the ability for your network to be connected to the cloud, and you drew it out where you needed that additional layer of security for if you want a private network for each of them to be connected to like a cloud service provider. So rolls into park with that complexity element. Very complex to do a cloud connection there. So I'm gonna give that a negative as well because again, not very cloud friendly because of the complexity of the infrastructure.
Okay, so that's a big name. All that IPsec tunnels, I didn't like all. I'm giving that a bunch of X's.
A bunch of X's.
FWA, broadband, well, that's the same thing. You're still connected to the internet, so we get a couple of X's there. And then obviously, this thing you talked about, that secure cloud connect and connecting one time, and then all these other FWA to PIP connections will be able to piggyback on that. So obviously, that's an easy win. And totals, well, I see a
There we
lot of
go.
X's. We're biased, definitely, but we see a lot of
Yes.
X's over there on the left-hand side, those left columns there, and some good gold stars
Good,
on right. So
good
I'm going
stuff.
to give the win to FWA and PIP there.